What's up, Nick? How we doing?
I'm doing good. I've got the sparkling cran raspberry LaCroix beverage, quenching my thirst.
I believe it's pronounced La Croix.
Really?
I don't know. Anyways. So, all right. Today, what I want to talk about with you, and for a little bit of context here, and correct me if I'm wrong, you recently started up. You're a photographer. You're a photographer by trade. Been doing it a while, and now you're starting to get into your own business, right?
That's right. I made the full leap of doing it part-time to just cutting my ties in the restaurant industry, and now I'm paying rent and feeding myself and paying my bills with my camera. So it's this weird transition where now there's no like official paper trail. I don't have any like checks coming in from like a company or like from like a restaurant anymore. So now like I've been getting paid a combination of like cash and checks from random people, and it's enough now where it's like, okay, like I think it's time to either start sole proprietorship or incorporate my business, because it's becoming my full income now, and it's not just a supplemental thing in addition to my other jobs. So
Cool. And
was that too long?
no, it's good.
All right.
That's good. So yeah, so besides Nick being my co-host in this, and the basically audio video engineer that we got, also doing his own thing on the photography business side. So, and I think you're in a situation that a lot of either aspiring and or budding entrepreneurs get into. You are at this juncture where you want to have something a little bit more legit, but maybe you're not necessarily super versed on what that is. And what I want to do today is kind of take you as like a case study. So
Okay.
my goal for the end of this video is to have you know roughly kind of what kind of business entity you want to form based on kind of what's right for your situation.
But that's I feel like what you said also about being at the juncture and not really, like a lot of times if you're an artist, you might not have the marketing skills that it takes, or the marketing skills that maybe you didn't put as much importance into your business skills, but it's just as much of a factor as the actual technical art that you're creating. So it's like, yeah, I'm at this unique point where I've made the leap, and now like I'm learning the business as I go along, but there's still a lot of things that I'm kind of ignorant of, or that I never really like fully looked into, that I'm experiencing now in the real world. And it's kind of like a rude awakening to like, how it actually works when you're on the inside looking out.
Yeah, and I don't want to get into too much of a tangent or go off on a tangent, but I think that is a good kind of like summary of kind of what crossing that kind of like chasm. Is that the right word? Chasm. Crossing the the bridge, the
Crevasse.
Crossing
that sounds better.
Yeah, that sounds better. Crossing the crevasse from being an employee or a practitioner or an artist into an actual business, and it's more than just knowing your craft. There has a lot of different pieces that go into it, like knowing the legal stuff, the operations, the accounting, the marketing, etc. So where I first want to start is just kind of defining what the difference between starting a business versus creating a legal entity.
Yeah.
Do you want to take a stab at it, or you want me to dive right into it? Like, do you want to take a stab at like guessing what that is, or what I'm going to say, or reading off my notes?
Well, I don't want to steal your thunder in any shape or form. So I'm going to let you take the stage, and I'm going to chime in when I feel it's appropriate.
Fair. All right. So to me, right, starting a business is all about that moment when you finally have like a transfer of goods and services, product or services for actual money, right? So this is me. I mean, other people can kind of debate what it actually means, but until you get to that point where you are actually getting paid for your work, right? That to me is starting a business. Now, that's separate from creating a legal entity, right? So creating a legal entity is when you form an entity recognized in law, right? For this is a business that you have that is has a structure, legal structure to it. And I want to make that distinction before we really dive into the nitty gritty, because I think a lot of times what people end up doing is they go out and the first thing they do is they create their legal entity, right? Yeah. They're like, ooh, I have this great idea. Let me go start an LLC. I have this great idea. Let me go start, this C Corp or whatever. And I think that's a huge mistake, right? I think that's putting the cart before the horse. And I think that it doesn't make you any more legit of a business just because you have an entity. Because what actually makes you a business is making money for your goods and services. So I want to start there. Okay. And my advice to anyone, except for the rare occasions, is that if you are starting a business, hold off on creating a legal entity until you absolutely need to. And the different situations are going to dictate what that actually is. I'll throw out like a couple examples if I can think of them off the top of my head. If you let's say it this way. Let's say you finally do get some money in. Yeah. Well, you need to put that money somewhere. Yeah. Well, you need an EIN number, employer identification number, in order to open a bank account. Well, in that case, you need to create a legal entity. Yeah. But if you had that money transferred to you via Venmo or Square, you don't need that EIN yet. And now that kind of validates you as a business before you need to go get that EIN and create an actual legal structure.
How long can you keep accepting payments off of Cash App and Venmo for your business before you decide that it's time to make that move? Because I feel like there's a lot of artists, especially now, these money exchanging apps where you can just with the press of a button provide a service and then have the money right in your pocket instantly.
Yeah. So the good news is, and we'll get more in depth in this in a little bit, is that the minute you start a business, exchange goods and cash, you're actually a sole proprietor. You actually are automatically a sole proprietor.
Well, I guess I'm a sole proprietor, huh?
Yeah. So there's kind of like the, by law, as soon as that happens, you're a sole proprietor. Now there are ways to make it more formal, which are always recommended, but you automatically have a business entity in place. So that's kind of the good news, is that you're already there. I guess the bad news, or kind of like the strengths and weaknesses of that, we'll get into in a little bit. So to answer your question a little more fully, when you do it is going to depend on some factors, such as if you have business partners, or what kind of industry you're in. If you're taking on a lot of risk, you're obviously going to want to do this sooner rather than later, right? Yeah. I think those are two of the more major factors. Another one would be if you want to raise money, you would have to create an entity sooner rather than later. And again, we'll get into that in a little bit.
I guess now for me, it's now I've invested close to $8,000 into my business in terms of equipment and software and stuff like that. But I haven't done the smart way. I haven't written anything off in my taxes. And I know there's a way that I'm spending all this money into a business that's sustaining me and not getting anything back. I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot. So that's one of the things now I'm thinking about, wow, I should have written off this $2,000 camera and these $3,000 of lenses that are just sitting in my bag.
Yeah.
And my voice cracked for the record because I'm drinking this Oriental Bush tea and it's making me hot and bothered.
So, all right. Whew. So, off of that, what I want to say is, I am not a lawyer. I am not a legal expert. I am not an accountant. Anything that I say during, from here on out, or prior to this, is just based on my experience, my research. I've started multiple business entities. I've studied multiple business entities. I've had to look this stuff up myself. And this is more me imparting my knowledge. Please, you, the people watching, check with, a lawyer, check with an accountant to be 100% sure. Do your due diligence yourself. My hope here, my goal here is to kind of guide you in the right way so you have a good place to start, and then you can take it over the line there.
But for the record, I am a real photographer, so let's get that straight.
Yes.
Let's get that straight.
Yes, he is. Professional. All right, cool. So let's dive into it. So there are four main types of business entities.
Yep.
Right. So we got 1, sole proprietorship, 2, partnerships, 3, corporations, and 4, limited liability corporations, or LLCs, as they're known.
Gotcha.
All right. So, like I said, our goal here is to figure out which entity would be right for you.
Yeah.
All right. So what we're going to start with is the questions that you should ask yourself and have the answers to help kind of guide us along this way.
Gotcha.
All right. So question number 1. This one's going to be pretty easy. Who should make decisions for your company?
Well, I think the main person making decisions should be me, but I definitely do have mentors and do have people in the business who I'm learning from, who I'm seeing how it works from the inside out. And that experience takes into account my own decisions. But at the end of the day, it's not their business, it's my business, and I'm creating something new. And I think I'm just kind of taking little pieces from all the different businesses that I'm surrounded with in the photography world and seeing what's right for me, and kind of like seeing how I would want to run my own business, and maybe the kind of workflow and the kind of like niche that I can jump into and have a share of a particular market.
Yeah. So in that sense, so I guess we can kind of boil that down and just say when the final say comes, you want to be the only one who says what happens. The expenses, the investments, everything that is yours and your decision solely, right? In terms of like the final say, not like information that you're getting from outside to like process and stuff.
Yes, at this point.
Yes.
While it's at this level.
Yeah.
But as it grows, I do not have the capacity or want to have all that responsibility while I'm trying to juggle the actual craft,
Okay, so let's back up a second then. Okay. So I can give you a little more clarity on this. So let's say I don't want you to get confused between delegating and like final say in a decision.
Okay, I was thinking about delegating, from our previous.
No,
discussion.
because how I would view that if I were you is if you give authority to somebody else.
Yeah.
But they can only make that decision based on the authority that you gave.
Yeah.
Then you would be the final decision maker, right?
Okay.
It wouldn't be as if you're 2 people that you're working with or a partnership and somebody could go make a decision without consulting you.
Okay.
Right.
That makes more sense.
Yeah.
Now. Okay.
Okay, cool. All right. Number 2, are you okay bearing personal liability for the company?
Would this also include, let's say I'm on a job, right? And one of my lights hits a toddler on the back of the head, and they're concussed. Unfortunate for both parties. Now, if I don't have insurance for my business at the moment, that means I'm paying out of pocket, and I'm going to be liable for any like misgiving that happens while Nick Moreland Photography is conducting a job of a client.
Yeah. And so what that means to kind of dive in a little bit further is if that incident were to happen and the business did not have enough assets to cover what was going on, then would you be okay with your personal assets being used to help pay off cash, cars, house, whatever it is, anything to your name, right? So that's what that personal liability means is basically it doesn't separate out the business from you as an entity. Anything that you own is also belongs to the business.
Okay.
Right. So again, the question is, what would you want to be personally liable or not. Now, to give you a little more context, because I know I'm kind of throwing you on the spot here with this.
Yeah.
Typically, how it would work is, businesses. Well, let me take it back. There's going to be trade-offs here, and we'll find out about these trade-offs as we go a little bit. Typically, what you give up for having less liability or separating out business liability from personal liability is simplicity in terms of like taxes and business structure and paperwork, et cetera. So it's always going to be a trade-off back and forth between what kind of do you want that simplicity side, do you want the liability side, and then you have to take into consideration like what is the chance of a light falling and hitting a toddler on the back of the head, right? If it's possible, and it also depends like what your tolerance for risk is.
Yeah.
Right? So those are all factors to take into consideration, and again, we can change as we go. But maybe ask the question that you're about to ask, but then also just kind of like what is your general feel, and we can always change what that is as we go through.
Because it could be the other way around too. I mean, also like what if one of my lights, makes a fire happen in my own house, or like I guess the other way, instead of like my equipment causing damage or bodily harm on another party, what if there's a flood, or what if my apartment catches on fire because my neighbor fell asleep smoking cigarettes, like then, with the liability thing too.
You're saying could the business be, if you have a personal liability occur, let's say, your house catches fire or something, would that potentially drain resources on your business?
Yeah.
That is a question I actually don't know the answer to. I'm going to guess and say because you're one legal entity, or if you are one legal entity, then your business would be jeopardized because of that, because there is no separation. But I would definitely have to check on that.
Yeah.
All right. So, kind of, what's your thought there? Liability separate or together for business and personal?
I think I would take the risk and do the path of simplicity at this stage of my development of my path.
Cool.
But potentially down the road, going the other way as things expand and operations get a little bit more intense, and there's more equipment and there's more jobs and there's more travel and stuff like that. So
right, yeah, and I think also too is the personal asset side of it too. It's like we live in the generation where we don't necessarily accumulate a lot of assets. We're like an on-demand, gig kind of generation. But as we get older, chances are we are going to accumulate more assets, and then there is more risk of having those assets be taken away if you don't separate the two out. So that's a good thing to consider in situations.
Well, I have been eyeing a 97 Subaru Forester with 150,000 miles on it for the past 6 months out in Germantown. But as of now, I don't have too many assets besides the equipment, my camera equipment, and the Whole Foods cart I borrowed from my mother that I used to transport my things here from Friendship Heights.
All right, number three.
I'm ready.
How do you want your company's income taxed? Now, there are two options here.
Yeah.
You're either have the income passed through. So what that means is basically any income that the business generates, any profit, right, or income, we use that interchangeably here, that the business generates would be passed through and taxed on your personal income versus it being taxed once on the corporate level and then taxed again on the personal level. And that's called double taxation. That is something we'll get into in a little bit.
But how would that affect? Because right now, the thing have to get adjusted to, I'm an independent contractor. I'm owing taxes at the end of the year.
Correct.
So if I did it the other way, get taxed twice, would that mean I get the money back at the end of the year? Or how would it work in terms of like, would that transfer into a refund if more is taxed? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's a little more complicated with that scenario because you could technically, if you're not passed through, you could technically be like a W-2 employee for your own company.
Yeah.
But then you would also have be taxed on the you'd be taxed on the profit of your shares just like you would as a 1099, or roughly. And again, I'm not a tax or legal expert, so but this is my basic understanding here, right?
Okay.
So yeah, it would be complex with the double taxation standpoint. The pass through is a lot easier to deal with. Let's put it that way in terms of this, what you have to take care of.
So just tell me, with that same question, right?
Yep.
As a person whose business is I'm the boss and the employee. Mm-hmm. So what would be the advantage and disadvantage of those two options that you gave me? Like, why should I or shouldn't I do either one of those choices?
Yeah, good question. So at your stage right now, and like I said, I'm kind of throwing you in the fire here because there's multiple factors. There isn't really an advantage to getting double taxed, right? And the advantages that come with the business structure that allow you to do that come with other advantages that probably aren't beneficial for you at this stage.
Yeah.
So like I said, I'm putting you at a little bit of a disadvantage by throwing these questions out and you not knowing the full context. But like I said, these are the first questions that you want to think of.
Yeah.
And then as we run through these guys, it'll clear up a little bit more. But like I said, there is no advantage to the double taxation piece. So more than likely, you're going to want that pass-through tax. Yeah.
Well, then you answered the question for me. Yeah. And now I'm off the hot seat, which is good because I'm wearing a flannel and it's it's not the most comfortable apparel for this particular moment in time.
No. All right, and last question, number 4. Do you want your company to exist beyond your death? I.e., would you want to pass it on to kids, transfer it to somebody else, or when you were to die, if you die ever, would you just want the company to dissolve into thin air? Do you want to pass it on to your wife?
I wouldn't wish this burden upon any other soul in this living world. I don't know. I don't really plan on having any kids. I don't really see anyone else in my immediate family that would have any interest in doing this. And I mean, I always told myself my 32nd birthday present would be a vasectomy. So I really don't.
You've always told yourself that?
I have. So I think I would want this company to die with me.
Okay.
And be cremated and spread along the Chesapeake Bay.
So all your camera equipment thrown in?
Well, no. You can sell that and you can give that to my wife.
All right. Is this your will?
This is my will. There's things that are being planned at this moment.
All right, cool. So we got that one. Company cremated and buried along with you.
In the Chesapeake Bay.
And sprinkled along the Chesapeake Bay.
That's right.
Got it. Or the first business entity we're going to talk about is sole proprietorship.
Yes.
So a sole proprietorship is any individual who opens a business alone is a
sole proprietor.
Considered a sole proprietorship by default. So as I said earlier, because you started taking money in for your services as a photographer, you're actually automatically considered a sole proprietor.
All right.
So basically, and another way to put it is that the owner and the company, the single owner and the company, do not have a separate legal existence. Okay. So you guys are looked together as a single entity. Now, just because you started a sole proprietorship or are a sole proprietorship by default does not mean you shouldn't register. A few reasons to do that. One, it just makes you look more legit and competent. You potentially can get an EIN number, which is required in some instances depending on what you're doing. A lot of times, instead of an EIN number, you would actually use your social security number, say if you want to open a bank account and stuff.
Yeah.
It also provides a solid legal foundation for expansion, and in some states, it might be required by law for you to do that anyways. All right, so those are reasons for you to actually register if you decide to go the sole proprietorship route or stick with that route, since technically that's what you are right now. So let's talk about a couple of strengths and weaknesses of this. All right. So first, the operating is very simple. Setting up is very simple. Taxes is very simple. That's a huge plus in all this is the amount of paperwork relative to, say, an LLC or a C Corp is very, very minimal. And the processes that you need to go to keep it in existence and set it up and everything, very, very minimal.
Yeah.
Taxation is very, very simple. Any income you get in your business is personal income. You do not file separately at all. And then it's really easy and simple to sell or transfer a sole proprietorship to somebody else if you wanted to.
But you can't write things off.
You can.
You can.
Yeah. So again, I'm not a tax professional or accountant or anything, but basically, if you were to do your taxes, I believe you can mark those as deductions.
Yeah.
Right? And so basically, again, not an accountant or anything, but you would have kind of your income, but then you would be able to deduct any expenses from your total income amount on your tax return, and then that means that the amount that you'd actually be taxed at would be lower.
Gotcha.
Right.
I'm at a weird place now. My lease is almost up. My paper trail from the restaurant has ended. Now, if I get a new place, how am I going to prove my income? And I'm in a weird state where it's like, yeah, I'm making more than when I was in the restaurant, but there's not really a trail right now, and can't really prove my income because I haven't taken these concrete steps yet. So that's where I'm at right now. So now I guess I'm stuck up in Chevy Chase, and my rent is going up soon. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah. So you'll definitely need to provide that paper trail. It's been something I've had to deal with before as well.
Yeah.
Especially like before when I was in the gym industry and I'm taking a lot of cash under the table. So it looks like I'm not making a ton of money. And I don't have a solid answer for you off the top of my head right now, how to get around that. But basically you're gonna have to be like, hey, listen, like here's the checks I write myself.
Yeah.
Or here's what's coming in. So you can show that until you actually have like a structure or at least a tax return to show. Which would be like maybe you file as quickly as possible in 2020 so that you can have something to show.
At least I can keep my Medicaid.
Yeah, exactly. All right, weaknesses of a sole proprietorship.
Yep.
The proprietor, so yourself in this scenario,
Okay.
is and would be the only person that is legally entitled to company profits.
Yeah.
So because of that, sole proprietorship is not a good structure for anyone who's looking to have partners or raise outside capital, because legally nobody else would be entitled to any profits. So why would somebody give money or be a partner with you if they weren't entitled to the profits?
I didn't know that. That's intriguing.
Yeah. So as we had talked about, in terms of would you want the business to live on, a sole proprietorship, once you pass away, sole proprietorship is done, buried along with you.
A lot of conversations about death today.
Yeah, we're getting real meta.
Little concerned. Do I look sickly? Do I look like I'm in bad health?
You look great and tan. I think you look fine.
All right.
Yeah. The proprietor is personally liable for the business. So in this case, you would be liable any of your assets if something were to go wrong with the business. So proprietorship is one of those entities where that you would not have personal protection on any assets. What was that car that you had your eye on?
Oh, it was a 97 Subaru Forester with 157,000 miles on it with a little hatchback.
So that baby would be on the line if you ended up going with the sole proprietorship.
Well, the reason why I like that car, no one driving it can go hard, so no one wants to steal it. Who wants to steal and joyride a 97 Subaru? You're not going to look cool with your friends.
Right.
You're going to say you could have gotten a different car. Why did you steal this car? You look like a nerd. Right?
Yeah, exactly. No, it's a good strategy.
That's
a
right.
good strategy.
Okay.
All right, cool. So that's sole proprietorship. Basic, high level, strength, weaknesses. How do we feel about that?
I feel like seems like, because of the simplicity, that it might kind of draw you into it, but I feel like it's like almost like a glass ceiling. It's almost like limiting like how much you can grow, and also like as you develop, it just seems like it's going to become an issue. Like it's going to be something you have to work around rather than something that you can work like into and take advantage of to expand.
Yeah. Okay.
That's just from my point of view.
Yeah. So basically, right now we can, as you know, we've only gone through more in depth kind of one entity type, so we can kind of say like this is a potential for you, but let's see what else is out there.
That's right.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Legal entity number 2 is a partnership. Basically, it's the type of company that 2 or more people create to go into business together. As a general kind of rule of thumb here, a partnership is very similar in a lot of ways to a sole proprietorship, except there's 2+ people involved instead of 1.
Now, is this almost like a marriage where if there's a divorce in the company, it's 50-50? Or how does it work if you go into business with a partner and then they're shady or they're not holding up their end of the bargain and you decide, I want out? Like, what's the exit?
So that's a good kind of point to bring up. So part of starting a partnership, what comes along with that is what is called a partnership agreement. So that's actually something that you would lay out in the partnership agreement in terms of what would happen if a split were to occur or a disagreement were to happen. Well, it's not necessarily required to have a partnership agreement, but it's highly recommended so that things like that can get ironed out ahead of time.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so it's kind of something where that would be left up to you guys, but that partnership agreement would be very crucial in determining what happens in that scenario.
What about about in terms of declaring bankruptcy as a sole proprietorship versus like a partnership? What if things go sour? Like that's another thing that I'm trying to understand, and this might be a side topic.
Yeah.
But how would that fall into if that situation were to happen while I have a sole proprietorship?
Yeah, so my basic understanding is because they're not a legal entity, like you would be, the business wouldn't itself be declaring bankruptcy, but you would be declaring bankruptcy as an individual.
Okay.
And again, not a legal expert, but that because there's no differentiation, my assumption would be that those two go hand in hand together in that scenario.
Okay.
Now, off that point with a partnership, basically, again, I'm gonna say the same thing. Check with a legal professional, accounting professional. However, one of the weaknesses, skipping ahead just slightly, is that one partner's bad decision can affect everyone.
Yeah.
And in a partnership, there is no separation of liability.
Yeah.
So the business, your personal assets, your partner's personal assets would be on the line.
Yeah.
And so if one guy goes ahead and does something really stupid and spends all the business money and or takes out a huge debt that defaults, yours and his or her assets would be on the line.
And that could be a long wild night at the Horseshoe Casino in Baltimore, gambling all the company money away at a blackjack table while you're sipping well gin out of a Dixie cup.
Are you describing a personal experience?
I'm not allowed back in the Horseshoe.
You just say I'm not allowed back in
until 2028.
All right, cool. So there are diving back into kind of a little more nitty gritty with partnerships. So there are 2 types of partnerships. There are general partnerships, and there are limited partnerships. Now, basically, with a general partnership, this would be 50-50 split down the middle in terms of like responsibilities, and both partners in this scenario would be operating partners. So you guys would all be responsible for the day-to-day.
Yeah.
With a limited partnership, basically that splits out into 2 different definitions of partners.
Yeah.
Where you would have one partner type that is a general, and then one partner type that is limited. So in that scenario, the general partner would handle day-to-day operations, and a limited partner would be more of like an investor, somebody who just put money in their passive as partners in the scenario.
Yeah.
So in that sense, if you wanted to potentially raise outside money, right, bring on a partner, maybe you had plans to expand and you wanted to bring in a partner, and they wanted to put in, $20K or $50K or whatever to the business and just see returns off that, take some of the profit, then a partnership would potentially be the way to go for that.
Where let's say someone had some money, they wanted to invest into a photography studio, and they would get all the equipment and the space, and then you would give them a cut of whatever profit you make from all your clients. And they saw if you're booked up for the next 6 months, then they can do the math and kind of figure out for me in my head, that's kind of a situation that I could see, at least in the photography business, someone investing in a space or a studio for you to work in, where money gets funneled into it and then funneled back into the investor.
Exactly. All right, so talking strengths and weaknesses here. So that is one of the big strengths, right? Capital can be raised in a sole proprietorship. You couldn't raise outside investments. So that's a pro if that's something that you want to do or have an eye on doing.
Yeah.
And then each partner can contribute skills to the venture. So again, if you're in a partnership, especially a general partnership, then everyone is contributing day to day equally. On the flip side, as we mentioned, one partner's bad decision as a weakness, one partner's bad decision can create liability for everyone, both personally and professionally. And then any disagreements among partners can potentially lead to a deadlock. That being said, if you have a partnership agreement defined, that could be one of the things that you address in the partnership agreement, where, if there is deadlock in a decision, there's going to be some third way to figure it out. Maybe if somebody arbitrates, or maybe you guys have figured out another way to do it.
What if your partner is doing something illegal? You don't have anything to do with it, but he's funneling money into the business that's not clean. He's laundering money with your business. Or what if your partner is, fixing his books and you're not aware of it? They get caught. Are you also liable to punishment for the crime if it's your business and your partner and it's the money that the company together is sharing?
Super complex question.
I'm sorry. It's a tangent.
Again, it's going to be.
Now I'm throwing you in the. See, you threw me in the fire. Yeah. Now I'm throwing you in the fire.
Yeah.
Not that
It's retaliation.
This is fresh information for me, so my head is turning, and I'm thinking okay, what are the possible worst case scenarios, or if I go into this venture, what could possibly happen?
Yeah.
With a potential partner, and how can I get out of it, and what are the different ways that I'm going to be liable, or what are the different exit strategies for these different choices?
No, of course. And I think, again, I'm going to keep saying this every time, not a legal expert, but...
Real photographer, though.
Yeah, real photographer, not a legal expert, real marketer. What I would say is it's complex in general, so I feel like that's going to be something decided in a court of law to begin with. But again, because of the structure of a partnership and the fact that there's not a separation from personal and legal and business liability, you might not be caught up. You would potentially not be caught up in the legality of the action that he's doing. But there could be potential risk that you might not be able to avoid because your liability. And again, it just depends on court of law and everything. And maybe you countersue him for whatever. It's going to get very, very complex at that point. My overall suggestion is don't go into business with somebody you don't trust really, really deeply.
That's right.
It's like a marriage.
That's right.
All right. So that's a partnership. Let's talk corporation.
All right.
So a corporation is a legal entity that is separate from the people who own and operate it. All right. So there are two types of corporations. There's a C Corp and there's an S Corp. And the basic difference between these two is as a C Corp, income is taxed through the corporation and through the shareholders who own shares in the corporation, right? Both of them pay tax. So the corporation pays tax, and then the individual pays tax. That's what's called double taxation, as we talked about before. Now, an S Corp, on the flip side, enables you to circumvent double taxation, but you have to be incredibly stringent in your note keeping, record keeping, and there's just a lot more like paperwork and legality that comes along with it in terms of like documenting everything.
That sounds like if you were delegating work to someone else, it's not something you would want to take on. At least me, I wouldn't want to take that on. So that would be
very, very tough for a small business to be able to do that. Like you'd have to be on top of everything in order to be able to keep track of all the stuff necessary to keep your S Corp status, right? And as we'll see, there are easier ways to circumvent the double taxation and get the protection that you want.
I mean, I frankly, I just don't want to be carrying around a T183 calculator in my jeans. They're just too tight.
They are. The jeans?
Yeah.
Calculator's too big? All right, so now why, I guess what are the strengths, right? Why would you want to have a C Corp? So basically, we'll start with the fact that they have a money-raising advantage over every other business entity. Yeah. So if you're a startup and you are going to raise venture capital money or angel investment money, the vast majority are going to require that you have C Corp status. Yeah. You will not be able to raise money, as we saw, by sole proprietorship, partnerships. Outside investors typically don't like to invest in, and same with LLCs, especially institutional investors like venture capitalists will not like to invest in those kind of business entities. But it makes it really easy to do that. They exist in perpetuity. So again, if you wanted to pass this on and transfer on the entity to your kids or you wanted somebody else to come in and run it, it's very easy for that to happen. The transfer of ownership is relatively easy, basically because you can buy and sell shares at will. And the big one here, this is the first entity that we see that there is zero personal liability. Okay. All right. Now, the big weakness is this double taxation. So basically what happens is the corporation gets taxed. So, and then when you get paid, you also, or when you receive your profit, your shares, they get taxed as well. So there's more money being given to Uncle Sam than these other business entities or these business structures. Yeah. Now I'm going to come out right and say it. This kind of entity would not be right for you. No. Yeah. And again, if you're like a startup, tech, most common, but you have, aspirations and raising a lot of money, a C Corp is definitely where you'd want to be. Gotcha. All right. So now let's hit the final one. You know what? I don't want to hit it. Let's hug it. Let's hug it. All right. Let's hug the final one. All right. LLC. All right. Limited liability corporation. Basically, this is a hybrid of both corporations and partnerships. Gotcha. So we kind of get the best, or we try to get the best of both worlds in this scenario. All right. So basically, strengths here, profits and losses are passed through. So just like we saw for the sole proprietorship and the partnerships, everything gets passed through to you, and so you don't get taxed twice. The corporate level doesn't get taxed; just the personal level gets taxed. Gotcha. All right. There is very limited personal liability. So there are kind of like these outstanding cases of like negligence or whatever, but for the most part, your business entity is separate from your personal in terms of liability. So you don't have to worry about, hitting the kid in the head, the toddler in the head, back of the head with a light, and then your Volvo, was it? Well, if my 97 Subaru, 157,000 miles of 3 previous owners, you don't have to worry about that getting taken from you. Well, I don't have to worry about it getting taken from me anyway, so it's just icing on the cake. All right, and then there's a flat organization structure. Basically, I didn't talk about this with the C Corp, but there's more of a hierarchy with like board members and directors. But with the LLC, that's much more flat. Yeah. So there's less complexity built into the actual structure. And if it's just, does it still even make sense if it's one person? Like, let's say you're the photographer, you're also
the one writing the paychecks, and then you're also publishing like books that you're selling under the same brand. Would that be a type of business that would make sense, or is that kind of like not the best for that situation?
Yeah. So really, what would come down to here is the trading the ease of forming and maintaining versus the separation of liability.
Yeah.
Right. So most things being equal, so an LLC, it can be one or more, right, members. So you could form it as yourself.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of, do you want to go through the process of setting it up? Maintenance is not a ton, but there is like a little bit of maintenance. And is that trade-off worth the division of assets that you'd get from separating business liability and personal liability? But it would 100% make sense.
Yeah.
And that would be the biggest question that I would ask you is, are you that concerned about it? If you are that concerned about it, then the recommendation would be set up an LLC.
Is it better to start like a straight sole proprietorship and a straight LLC and stay in that lane, or to like start as a sole proprietorship and then transition into one of the other ones? Like, is it making it harder for yourself to start off at a sole proprietorship and transition into something else rather than just going straight into maybe an LLC instead of starting as a sole proprietorship?
No, and I would say, given your scenario and kind of, what I know about you and your business and where you're at, that's kind of easing into it would probably make the most sense.
Yeah.
I think you're still getting your
my toes wet?
I was gonna say sea legs, but yeah, toes wet, feet wet, whatever it is. Just dipping the toes.
I do have to take Dramamine when I ride boats or planes, so I don't know if I'll ever get my sea legs without the use of a heavy sedation.
That's fair. So you're still getting your sea legs in there for kind of running a business and being a business. So I think it's perfectly reasonable for you to say, hey, I'm going to start out as a sole proprietor. And then, if things start picking up, maybe you feel like you want that level of protection, maybe you start to expand out, then that makes sense to then switch into an LLC.
That's kind of where I'm leaning now.
Yeah.
Like now that we've come full spectrum, that kind of, for me, that seems like the route that I want to take.
Awesome. Good. I was hopefully not leading you there, but that's kind of what I was hoping you would come to the conclusion.
I feel like you had a hot, sharpened stick, and you were
It's like jabbing it into your back.
Well, you were
over and over.
You were hurting me into the flames of proprietorship, and I was resisting, but the pain was driving me against my will.
All right. So, all right, let's wrap up real quick. Just wanted to give you guys and you some resources to actually create these entities.
Sure.
All right. So 3 big ones that I've either used personally or actually 4, because I just remembered another one, which I might or may not tell you if I can remember the URL. But so the first one is LegalZoom. So I think most people are familiar with that. Pretty straightforward process, easy to get into. That's my recommendation for LLCs, partnerships, and for sole proprietorships. If you are a startup, you're in the tech space, and you want to form the C Corp, I would look into Stripe Atlas or something called Clerky. There's a whole thing about the benefits of incorporating in Delaware or Nevada or Wyoming. And I'm not going to get into this too much, but basically they're just very friendly to startups. Typically, if you're a business like you are, if you do most of your business in Maryland, you would want to create your business entity in the state that you do your majority of your business in. Well, if you're a tech startup, you have the ability to not do that.
Well, Delaware has no taxes and it's mostly flat.
Yeah, like that. So easy bike riding.
No hills.
Yeah. Let's see. So it says Stripe Atlas and Clerky, and then there's one I use that I can't actually remember the name. I think it's smallbiz dot something. I'll give me 5 seconds to find it. Smallbiz.com, actually.
Okay, there we go.
There it is. Don't be fooled by the incredibly old-looking website. They do good work, I've used them for multiple business entities I've set up. So that's another option there. But I can understand if you're a little turned off by the fact that the site was probably built in the early 2000s and looks like it was built in the early 2000s.
I would like to think that I'm the only one who knows what turns me off.
That's fair. I don't want to speak for you. You're right. All right, cool. Anything else, Nick?
I think that's everything. We are running out of time very quickly.
Very, very close. All right, cool. Later, guys.